I'm sort of going to argue on behalf of both sides, or be neutral. Or I can't be neutral, or, being an atheist, you cannot be neutral. But the mere fact that everyone has been always arguing about the fine-tuned argument, actually, the atheists have already bombarded the fine-tuning argument to pieces. It's been nuked completely from orbit. I think as long as people tend to feel that there's a need to prove themselves right on behalf of the argument of God, I don't think that we cannot do anything, we cannot do much. We argue on the basis, my dad, he's always saying, who made the chair? Human being, right? It's like trying to say that a wind blows and for some reason it just assembles a 747 by its own, by chance. But this is false equivalency. It's easy to say that because it tells you it's easy to think in terms of simple terms like that, simple correlations. But the truth is that we cannot distill it to a simple fact of life, that the world and the universe is not finely tuned at all, and if it is, there sure isn't finely tuned for us, and it isn't God. Now, Dark Matter 2525 has already said about what it is that, just because you see a flower growing out of a concrete sidewalk, it most certainly does not mean that the concrete sidewalk was designed for a flower. I'd love to believe in God. I'd love to think that there was some sort of heaven and hell where sinners get their end. And, the problem is there's so many things that, what about people who didn't want to be born evil, but were born evil? What about people like, bullies who were bullied in their lives? What about karma? What about me? I get the shit from people and, they tell me, what about autistic people? We're mocked for all their lives. They get the hatred from neurotypicals, from normal people. And, this is what we have to endure. But where is God in all of that? So people make up excuses and all that kind of bull fucking shit about like, oh no, it's just, now we've got like people hitting on the incels and all that, but you got men who are just trying to say that I need some love, I need some attention. The same as women are trying to say. But nobody's getting any love, nobody's getting any attention. It's the haves just as the have-nots. It's when that the world tries to side with Batman, but realizes that the right guys were Carmen, Falcone, and all the bad guys along because none of them had love in their lives. That's the problem. We're so racist, we're so, hell-bent on dividing ourselves that we forget to see that we're all human beings that require the same kind of love and respect and reciprocity. I got tongue-tied there. Reciprocity. I don't know how to pronounce it. And that's the thing about it. You're judged every time. What does that denote? That it means that there isn't a God. If there's a God, clearly he would need all these things. The simplest way to even argue that there's no existence for a God would be that science exists. Why? Because the mere fact that science exists showcases that God does not exist, because God wouldn't need to teach people how to figure out how to deal with this on their own and how to figure out how to build ships and oceans and all, build artificial structures. All of this shit is actually the very nature of modern civilization itself, is already an antithesis to the existence of a god. And if there is a god, and it's like some sort of biblical, like you have to have the whole world being, and literally, let's just say, for example, right, the world entirely, like basically the Bible is canon, like the Bible is historical. Now, the issue is that in today's world, that the historicity of Jesus is really being debated. That we don't know what happened 3,000 years ago. There's not much evidence for Ark of the Covenant. If there is, if there's like ancient alien civilizations, they surely as hell been wiped out with Kara Horror-Shaft and all that kind of stuff. Okay, but there's still evidence for Kara Horror-Shaft. There's still evidence for like, people can still make up like evidence. People can talk shit and make up a book or whatever it is. But if the book says what it is, there's got to be historically some sort of evidence for it. People say there's evidence. There's not much evidence that we can prove. And we're not going to even go into the evidence here for a while. We're going to just talk about the mere fact that our civilization exists. Now, why would a god need to punish his own creations for sin, for something that is finite, that you can say a pedophile, right? He's only acting as his impulses in the finite time that he has, just for the sake of his needs and wants that aren't being achieved. But if you say that he has been born and God decides to go to, God is omnipotent, right? He decides who's already in heaven, who's already in hell. Right, or who believes in Jesus Christ. That to me is the most arbitrary, ridiculous law that has ever been made to justify their existence on earth. So you haven't been here, you don't know who Jesus Christ is. And those who don't know doesn't get to live doesn't have to get eternal life. That's ridiculous. That's like 5 billion people. The people who need help most should be the ones that are poor. Like imagine all the poor, all the downtrodden. When they die, they go to heaven automatically because they've been given nothing in their lives. So they should have at least something in their lives after death, which should be fair enough. Or a simplest, fairest way to argue this, God provides a system that is fair and balanced. That in this world, life is unfair, but when you die, life becomes fair because you get everything. When you get everything, you die and you become poor again. It's like, okay, I have nothing in this life. I pay for my sins. Or rather, I don't believe in Jesus. I believe in Jesus, you die. But the atheist, even if he doesn't believe in Jesus, he gets to see God and he believes in Jesus, and he still goes to heaven. We still have a principle that humanity is judging each other by the rule. Everyone thinks it's okay to send send somebody to hell, even like Hitler or it's Peter Scully, the worst pedophile ever, or Epstein. But would that do any good to himself? Would that do any good to figure out, people suffering eternally? Even in Supernatural, it's like, he got bored because he thought that Dean and Sam were, on paper it sounds good that, I can punish you for hell for eternally, but it's just like, viewing experience is just meh. Because you're just punishing that person eternally. There's nothing great about it. And even he doesn't get to learn anything, even if he knew what he did wrong, and he's like completely sorry. You would say sorry 1,000 million billion times, and that it depends on whether you can change or not. So, for example, there's a sinister, very nasty theory out there that karma is so predominantly, how would I say this, nasty, that the victims, like the pedophiles themselves, become victims of pedophiles. Alright? But the problem is twofold. One, you need to remember that you were a pedophile in the past life. Two, you need to remember that you did something so wrong and you knew wrong. So if reincarnation exists, it doesn't surely help anyone, because unless those who are remembering the past lives, they would be able to understand why. Those who did wrong would suffer their own wrongdoings. But the problem is, if let's just say, you would enact out the act again. There are people who were preyed upon as children that become pedophiles, when they grow up. Yes, there are a few people who do that kind of shit. But let's take, for example, the spiritual element out. And let's take, for example, just scientifically, solely materialist science says that it's all just biology, neurology, that it's all about the frontal lobe, it's all about the frontal cortex, and a couple other things that are starving the man to death, that, all these things are caused by neurological circuits that malfunction. And there's just no such thing as evil. Everything that people do about rape, all these wrongdoings, are just neurological problems that we as society have to solve instead of shooting first and asking questions later. People say it's incurable. There is a cure. There's a cure for pedophilia, there's a cure for rape, there's a cure for all sorts of things. If we can even cure cancer in the future, we can surely as hell cure all these problems. Right? The issue is tribalism. Today, we live in a society that we look at the Western society and every other society out there, that predominantly the young people are becoming more, how do I say this, evolving in their physical attractiveness, evolving in their physical stature. You see all these teenagers going to the gyms. You see all these people going to the gyms to work out and have like so-called Riz, but you see all certain things going backwards, like the nature of language. People are dumbing our language. And in the 1800s, we had such profound, complex use of the language of English. During the time of, of course, I think still to this day, everyone's pretty serious about language, right? But when you talk about the young generation, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, right? They fight amongst themselves. They're cruel. They're cruel towards each other. When I was young, people treated me cruelly and harshly. Even the millennials treated me cruelly and harshly to me. And the adults treat each other as bullies. So honestly speaking, I'm sick and tired of the way that people have treated me. If they don't like me, they can fuck off. And so I was kicked out of many groups and classes, right? And people say that my behavior is bad. But I've seen some people as well that they were really, negative towards you. So you start figuring out that you just didn't tolerate shit from other people anymore. You just completely don't tolerate it anymore. You don't fucking tolerate it from other people. You don't lose out from other people, and you just don't fucking have it. I'm sick and tired of these fucking people. There's this guy that I hate so much that I want to fucking thrash him. Fuck the cops, man. Fuck the cops for bullying fucking hell. I felt like I wasn't involved in my fucking life. I never had a chance. And you can't blame incels, man. As long as men bully other men, there will always be incels. As long as men kill, hate, judge, despise, and as long as the shorter men get bullied, as long as we adhere, as long as we become eugenicists, like the Nazis themselves. We hate the Nazis, but we become Nazis ourselves. Then, nothing else in our life will change. The incels will always continue to shoot hate. There will always be people who will hate. But the people that actually incite and hate other people are the ones that do not get caught. If as long as men fight, bully, as long as women ignore men, as long as women hate those kind of ugly men that are like, as long as the autistic people, as long as the people that are downtrodden get shat upon, that do not get tolerated upon, do not get loved, you know, as long as we are not taught and loved for, we will not, the society will not get any better. As long as people are continuing to be mistreated on the basis of how they look, which they do, on the basis that we're autistic, but people do mistreat people like that. People do mistreat. As long as there's rich and there's poor, as long as the poor defend the rich, there will always be people who will hate, because the rich defend their hatred towards the poor. And as long as we do not, as long as, when we talk science and religion, as long as people have egos and arrogance, and you know, my way is better, his way is shit, he's ugly, he's this, and as long as people put on a mask to you know, tell each other, as long as our families are broken, and you know, especially the Chinese, and as long as people are racist towards each other, ableist, whatever fucking ISTs there are, we will always make these groups. We will always have these groups happening. There will always be incels, and we cannot limit. There will always be anti-life groups that we bring forth, because we are actually the ones responsible for the mess that we've made ourselves in. We are our own enemies. We've made the incels happen because we judged them. Now, going back to the topic about God and all that kind of stuff, and fine-tuning. In my head, I've posted 2 videos about this. If we don't find a way as human beings to get together, to uplift each other, to help the ugly be beautiful, to help the poor be rich, to help the have-nots be haves, we will never have a society that loves each other. If we do, we wouldn't have a problem like this in the first place. Unfortunately, we don't.